I don't think you can ever fully prepare for the feeling of being blindsided. It's like walking into a room full of people, thinking you know everything and everyone, only to have the walls close in around you and realize you've been living a lie. That night, I should have known something was off. But I didn't. Maybe I was too busy making excuses for her, or maybe I was just too comfortable. Either way, I walked into our house that evening with a sense of unease creeping up my spine. And Isabel, my wife, was standing in the middle of the living room, looking like she was on the verge of losing her mind. She'd been pacing around for hours, trying on outfit after outfit, muttering to herself like it was some sort of existential crisis. I watched her go from one dress to another, none of them good enough, apparently. She was always the type to know exactly what she wanted, but that night, she was a mess. Every time she looked at herself in the mirror, she'd sigh, shake her head, and throw another outfit on the floor like it wasn't worth a damn. It was frustrating to watch. But more than that, it was starting to get to me. I tried to stay out of it, but then she snapped. What do you think? Does this work? She had finally settled on this crimson dress, something that clung to her like it was glued on, showing off her curves in a way that was too obvious, too deliberate. I didn't like how she was acting, and the fact that she was asking for my opinion like it mattered, that felt weird. Isabel didn't need approval. She didn't need anyone's validation. But there she was, waiting for me to say something. Yeah, you look amazing, I said. It was the truth. She did. But the way she was standing there, that strange look in her eyes. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I didn't like it. I could feel the unease crawling in, but I pushed it down. She spun around, the hem of the dress twirling as she did, a half-smile dancing on her lips. But her eyes? Her eyes didn't match the smile. There was a flicker of something. Nervousness, maybe, or guilt. But I didn't know her well enough to recognize it for what it was. Not then. It's for the gala, she said. You know, for my work. I nodded, even though I hated these things. The company's annual event, a night of fake smiles and mind-numbing speeches about how great the company was. She'd insisted I go. She always did. It'll look bad if you don't show up, she'd say. And every year, I'd give in. So, tonight wasn't going to be any different. I grabbed my coat, slipped it on, and followed her out the door. I didn't ask her why she'd been acting like this, why she'd been so distant the past couple of weeks, coming home later than usual with excuses that didn't make sense. A new project here, a sudden meeting there. It was always something. I didn't question her. Not then. I should have. When we got to the hotel, I was already over it. The lobby looked like a museum. Gold chandeliers, marble floors, and a bunch of overpaid guests standing around, pretending to enjoy themselves. Isabel looked like she'd just stepped into another world. She slipped out of the car and immediately transformed, her nerves gone as quickly as they'd come. Now she was back in her element, greeting people like she was the queen of the room. Her laughter was louder than normal, a little too forced. She touched people's arms when they talked, leaning in a bit too close, like she was trying to make herself unforgettable. I, on the other hand, hung back. I stayed by the bar, nursing a drink, watching her float through the crowd. She was the center of attention, as usual. But tonight? Tonight it felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a tension between us that wasn't there before. Maybe it was just me, maybe I was overthinking it. But I could feel it, like the air was thick, and no one was willing to acknowledge it. As the night went on, the nagging feeling in my chest didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. Isabel was everywhere, laughing, talking, being the star of the show. She'd disappear for a few minutes here and there, always on her phone, always busy. And when she wasn't looking at her phone, she was too busy checking herself in the mirrors, making sure she still looked perfect. It wasn't normal. There was a part of me that wanted to call her out on it, to ask her what was really going on, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was just working hard, just doing her thing. But the more I watched her, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was off about her. And then, it happened. I should have known better than to ignore my gut. I should have trusted that little voice that kept telling me something was up. But the night went on, and I just kept pushing it aside. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. Isabel was, after all, the life of the party, and I'd never been the type to stir up trouble. Not unless I had proof. But then the moment came. The moment I couldn't ignore. We were sitting at a table during the CEO's speech, something long and tedious that everyone pretended to care about while trying to sneak another drink. Isabel was beside me, her phone buzzing on the table, the screen lighting up with messages. At first, I thought nothing of it. She was always glued to her phone, always working, always busy. But tonight, the way she grabbed her phone, how fast and tight she gripped it, almost like she was trying to hide something, hit me like a ton of bricks. She shot me a quick glance, almost as if checking if I'd noticed. But I was already looking at her, watching her swipe at the screen so quickly, her fingers flying over the keys. She seemed tense. Her jaw tightened. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? But before I could even question it, she snapped her phone shut and cleared her throat. Just some work emails, she muttered, her voice stiff, like she was trying to make the whole thing seem normal. Right, I said, trying to keep my cool. I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening, but I said nothing. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. Then, just like that, she excused herself. I'm gonna go freshen up, she said, standing up. She didn't even wait for me to respond. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked off, disappearing into the crowd of people. And I was left there, alone, surrounded by a sea of chattering strangers, trying to keep myself from unraveling. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe she just needed a break. Maybe she just wanted to stretch her legs. But deep down I knew something was wrong. And that sick feeling, the one I'd been ignoring all night, flared up again, more intense this time. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Still no Isabel. By now, my patience was wearing thin. The whole time, I could feel my anxiety building. Why was she taking so long? What was so important that she couldn't come back to her husband, sitting alone in the middle of the gala? I told myself I was being irrational, but my feet were already moving before I could stop myself. I stood up, setting my drink down, and walked towards the bathroom area, thinking maybe she'd gone in there. No sign of her. I checked the bar, crowded as ever, still no Isabel. My head was spinning. Where the hell was she? I wasn't thinking straight anymore. I just needed to find her. So, I started to head toward the cloakroom. Maybe she went outside for a breath of fresh air. But as I got closer to the door, I heard it. Soft, muffled laughter. A laugh that didn't belong. Not here. Not in the cloakroom. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart hammered in my chest, and everything else went silent in my head. The laughter. It wasn't just any laugh. It was hers. That breathless laugh. The one she used to give me when we were alone. The one I hadn't heard in a while. And it wasn't just her. I could hear another voice. Someone else was laughing with her. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move at first. I wanted to turn around, to pretend I hadn't heard it. But my body wasn't listening. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside, and what I saw knocked the wind out of me. There she was. Isabel. And standing way too close to her was Ryan, one of her co-workers from the company. I've met him a few times before, but I didn't know him that well. He was leaning in, too close, his hand resting on her waist as if it belonged there. And Isabel? Isabel was laughing that laugh, soft and intimate, the kind she used to give me when we'd just gotten home from a night out, when the world felt quiet and ours. My stomach churned, and I froze. I couldn't breathe. My entire body locked up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I just stood there, my eyes glued to them. I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me snapped, and I stepped into the room, fully. My voice came out calm, too calm. It was like I was watching myself from the outside, but I couldn't stop the words that came out of my mouth. Well, I said, my voice unervingly steady. This is cozy. Isabel's face went pale in an instant. Her eyes went wide, and for a split second, I saw panic shoot through her, real, raw panic. The kind of panic I hadn't seen in her since we first started dating and I caught her in a lie about her ex. Ryan straightened up quickly, shoving his hands in his pockets, looking awkward as hell. Isabel scrambled to put some distance between them, as if that could erase the moment. As if shoving him away could erase what I just saw. She cleared her throat, her voice breaking as she stammered, "Ethan, it's not what it looks like." My laugh was bitter, sharp. "Really?" I said. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is whispering sweet nothings to some guy in a cloakroom." Ryan stepped forward, hands up like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "Man, this isn't what you think," he said, his voice tight. "We were just—" "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off before he could say another word. My voice cracked the air between us like a whip. "I'm not interested in your excuses." I turned my eyes back to Isabel. "What the hell is going on?" I said, my voice low. Not angry. Just empty. Her lips trembled. She crossed her arms, standing there with this defensive posture, like she could somehow talk her way out of it. "We were just talking, okay?" "Talking," she said, her voice high-pitched and shaky. "Talking?" I repeated, laughing again, though it was hollow this time. "In a cloakroom? With your hand on his waist?" Isabel rolled her eyes, her tone turning snarky. "You're overreacting. We were just talking." I didn't know what hurt more, the words, or the fact that she thought I was stupid enough to believe them. The lie was so thin, I could see right through it. But I stood there in silence, just looking at her, feeling the pieces of my world crumble around me. "Ryan." He mumbled something under his breath, awkward as hell, and slipped past me without saying another word. But I didn't even care about him. My eyes stayed locked on Isabel. I was done. The silence between us felt suffocating. It wasn't even the kind of silence that made you want to speak up, to fill the void. It was the kind of silence that made you realize how far gone everything was. Isabel stood there, her arms crossed defensively, her face flushed with a mix of guilt and disbelief. But it was the disbelief that stung the most. The look in her eyes wasn't the same as the one I had seen before, the one that was warm, reassuring, full of love. No, this was different. This was the look of someone who had been caught, who knew the game was over but was trying, with everything she had left, to convince herself that it wasn't. "Ethan, you're overreacting," she repeated, her voice quieter now, but still laced with that false confidence she always wore. "We were just talking. I don't know what you're making all this out to be." She shook her head, as if trying to convince herself just as much as she was trying to convince me. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I didn't need to. The words were there, sharp on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of hearing me argue. I wasn't about to waste another breath on her pathetic excuses. Instead, I just stared at her, my gaze cold and unwavering, like I was seeing her for the first time in years. "You really think I'm that stupid, don't you?" I asked, my voice still unervingly calm. It was the calm before the storm, but somehow, I felt like I was the one holding all the power now. "You think I don't know what I saw? Don't think for a second that I don't see the way you've been acting lately, how you've been disappearing, how you've been so distant. Don't act like this is just some innocent conversation." Isabel's face faltered for a second, but she quickly regained her composure, flashing me a look of defiance. "You're being ridiculous, Ethan. This is nothing. You're blowing things way out of proportion." She was lying, and I could see it in her eyes. The words were all wrong, all the wrong notes of a woman who had been caught. She was trying so hard to play it cool, but the cracks were showing. The mask she wore for so long was starting to slip. "Don't lie to me," I said quietly, almost a whisper. "I saw everything. I saw how you were laughing, how you looked at him, how you let him touch you. Don't think I didn't see that." My words were deliberate, heavy, like each one was landing on her chest. "So don't stand there and try to make it sound like I'm crazy. I'm not the one in the wrong here, Isabel." Her face turned red, and she quickly looked away, her eyes darting nervously. For a second, I thought she might finally break, finally admit the truth. But then she took a deep breath, like she was gathering her strength, and the walls went back up. "It's not like that, okay?" she said, her voice losing some of its edge but still carrying that defensive tone. "It was just a moment. I don't even know what you want me to say. Nothing happened." That's when I snapped. "Nothing happened?" I repeated, the words coming out with so much force I almost surprised myself. I took a step closer to her, closing the gap between us, feeling the tension spike between us. Is that what you're going with? Nothing happened. I was furious now. You expect me to just take your word for it after what I saw? After everything you've been hiding from me? She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She was stalling. She always did this when she didn't have a good answer. And deep down, I knew she didn't have one. Nothing she said would change what I saw. I don't know what you want from me, she muttered, her hands fidgeting in front of her. This is ridiculous, Ethan. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. I could see it now. The cracks were widening. She was unraveling, and there was no way to stop it. I didn't have to say anything more. She knew I didn't believe her. And that, right there, was the hardest part for her. It wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't the accusations. It was the fact that I had finally stopped buying her lies. Isabel, I said, my voice quiet again, but this time it wasn't calm. It was heavy with the weight of everything that had built up in me over the last few weeks. You've been lying to me for so long, I don't even know who you are anymore. She opened her mouth to say something, but then just closed it again, like she was weighing her options. I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how to twist this, how to play the victim. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not this time. She was caught, and she knew it. I'm done, I said, the finality of those words hanging in the air. I'm done with your excuses. I'm done with you pretending like I'm stupid. I don't want to hear it anymore. Isabel took a step back, her expression faltering for a moment before it hardened again. Fine, she snapped, her voice sharp, like a knife. You want to make it seem like I'm the bad guy? Go ahead. But you're not going to like what comes next, Ethan. You think you've got it all figured out? You don't know anything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was trying to turn the tables, but she couldn't do it. Not anymore. Not after everything I saw. I turned and walked away from her, heading toward the exit. I didn't need to hear her try to talk her way out of this. I didn't need any more of her lies. I had already seen the truth, and nothing she could say was going to change it. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. What I had just discovered was just the tip of the iceberg, and the rest of it was waiting for me to uncover it. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I'd get the answers I needed. I'd make sure of it. And Isabel? Well, she was about to realize that there were consequences for everything. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this so easily. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions, work, errands, small talk with friends, but inside, everything felt different. I couldn't shake the image of Isabel in that cloakroom, laughing with Ryan like it was the most natural thing in the world. The worst part wasn't just that she'd cheated. It was the realization that I hadn't seen it coming, that I'd been blind to everything she was hiding. I had let her lie to me for so long, and I couldn't help but feel stupid for it. She didn't say anything after the gala. No apologies. No explanations. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She just kept up the same facade, acting like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't standing on the edge of some precipice, looking down at everything we'd built together, ready to crumble. And that's when it hit me. I had to make her feel it. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to just sit back and let her walk away, brushing off the consequences of her betrayal. I had to take control of this situation. I spent the next few days getting my act together, figuring out my next move. Isabel wasn't the only one who knew how to play games. If she thought I was going to just fold and let her win, she was dead wrong. I started small. Just a few innocuous moves at first. Nothing that would raise her suspicion. I spent more time at the gym, keeping myself busy, staying in shape. Not for her, not anymore. But for me. I wanted to feel strong again. I wanted to feel like myself, not the guy who'd been made a fool of by his own wife. Then I started digging into Ryan. I wasn't going to let him off easy either. If he thought he could waltz into my life and take what was mine without consequences, he had another thing coming. I had to get to know him, to understand his weaknesses, his history, his habits. It wasn't hard. Ryan was one of those guys who put everything out there online. Social media profiles, work connections, hobbies, the works. It didn't take long to find some of his posts in a private forum where he interacted with other employees from the company. He was a talker, liked to think of himself as some sort of ladies' man. In a way, that worked to my advantage. I could use that ego of his, feed it, manipulate it. I needed to get him to trust me, to make him feel like I was a confidant, a friend he could open up to. I started following him on some forums, commenting on posts, liking pictures, sharing some of the same interests, pretending to be someone I wasn't. Slowly, I began to build a rapport with him. We'd chat about sports, work, whatever came up. Nothing that seemed out of place. But all the while, I was planting seeds. Small, subtle hints about how easy it would be to manipulate Isabel. To get her to fall for him again. To make her feel like she was in control, like she had the upper hand in this little game we were all playing. The real trick was making him think he was in control. I had to make him believe that he was the one calling the shots. That's how you get someone like Ryan. You feed their ego until it's too big to ignore. It didn't take long before he was sending Isabel flirtatious messages. Nothing overt, nothing too obvious. Just little comments, things that made her think he was interested. I had learned just the right things to say to him, the right way to nudge him in the direction I wanted. I wasn't trying to break them up. No, that wasn't the goal. I wanted Isabel to see what it felt like when the tables were turned. I wanted her to feel the confusion, the guilt, the fear. I wanted her to see how easy it was for someone else to make her feel special, make her feel wanted. I wanted her to understand what she had done to me. The day Isabel found out was the day everything changed. I was sitting in the living room when she walked in, her face as pale as a ghost. She was holding her phone in her hand, her knuckles white from gripping it so tight. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow. "Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "What the hell is going on?" I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, waiting. I knew exactly what she was talking about. Her hands shook as she held up her phone, showing me a message from Ryan. "Hey, I can't stop thinking about you. Maybe we could grab a drink sometime, just the two of us? I know we've been keeping things professional, but I don't think I can ignore how I feel anymore." It wasn't a full-on confession, but it was enough. It was enough to make Isabel's blood run cold. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Why are you texting me like this? What the hell is going on?" I stood up slowly, feeling a sick satisfaction bubble inside me as I watched her squirm. I let the silence stretch on, just long enough for her to feel the weight of what was happening. "You really don't know, do you?" I said finally, my voice quiet but full of venom. "You think I wouldn't find out? You think I didn't know what you were up to?" Her eyes searched mine, a mix of confusion and panic written all over her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I stepped closer to her, my voice steady, almost like I was explaining something to a child. "You wanted to play games, Isabel? You think you can screw around behind my back without any consequences?" Her face twisted in frustration, and she finally blurted, "What do you want me to say? That I messed up? That I made a mistake? I didn't mean for this to happen. It's not like you think, Ethan. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Sorry? You're sorry? You think a text like that is just something you can apologize for?" I stepped back, the anger bubbling up again. "No, Isabel. You're not sorry. You're scared. And that's all it is. You've been playing with fire, and now it's burning you." She swallowed hard, her eyes darting down to the floor. I could see the panic rising in her, the guilt finally hitting her square in the chest. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. "You don't get to play the victim here," I said, my voice low and menacing. "Not anymore." She looked like she was about to say something else, but then her phone buzzed again. I could see her hesitate, her hand hovering over the screen. But she didn't pick it up. She just looked at me, waiting for my next move. And I knew in that moment she was realizing that everything she had done, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, was finally coming back to bite her. The worst part was, She had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. It was my turn now. And I wasn't done yet. The days that followed felt like a countdown, a slow, suffocating march toward something I couldn't quite name yet. Isabel was different now, though. There was a shift in her. She was no longer the confident woman I thought I knew. She was anxious, frantic even. Every time she looked at me, her eyes would flicker with uncertainty, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She'd try to act like nothing had changed, but it was impossible to ignore. The truth was out in the open, and there was no taking it back. She tried to apologize, of course. I knew it was coming the second she showed me that message from Ryan. She said all the things she thought I wanted to hear. How sorry she was, how much she regretted it, how she didn't know what had gotten into her. But I wasn't buying any of it. Not anymore. Ethan, I swear it was just a stupid mistake, she'd said one night, her voice trembling, but there was something fake in her apology. I could see right through it. You know I love you. This was just a stupid moment of weakness. I messed up. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. She could say whatever she wanted, but it wouldn't change what I knew. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. I don't know if I can believe you anymore, I said, my voice steady, but the weight of it hung in the air. She froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. You don't mean that, she whispered, taking a step closer, like she was trying to close the distance between us, but the space felt bigger than ever. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. No, Isabel. I mean it. You don't get to apologize for something like that and expect me to just forget. You don't get to tear us apart and then act like everything's okay. She looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Fear. Real, raw fear. It was like the foundation of everything she'd built had cracked, and now she was standing on unstable ground. I'd spent days thinking about it, about what I wanted to do next. Revenge wasn't about some big confrontation or yelling at her for hours. No, it was about taking control back. Making her see the cost of what she'd done. And of course, making Ryan feel the heat of my anger too. If I was going to do this, I needed to make them both understand that I wasn't the man they could just walk all over. I'd spent hours thinking about the message Ryan had sent her, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and started typing, my fingers moving with a kind of precision I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't going to send some vague, leave my wife alone message. No, this had to hit him where it hurt. It had to be clear that he wasn't going to get away with this. The message read, I know what you've been doing. You think you've won, but you haven't. You're just a pawn in Isabel's game. She's been playing you, just like she played me. Think she's the kind of woman you want to mess with? Keep playing with fire, and you'll get burned. Don't think I don't know what she's capable of. You've been warned. I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. In fact, I wasn't sure I wanted one. What mattered was the message. What mattered was that Ryan saw me as a threat, that he knew I was onto him, and that Isabel realized there was nowhere to hide anymore. The walls were closing in on her, and I was the one tightening the noose. The next few days were tense. Isabel still tried to act normal, tried to go through the motions like we could pretend nothing had changed. But the silence between us was unbearable. Every time she came near me, I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She didn't know what I was planning. She didn't know how far I was willing to go to make her understand the pain I'd felt, the betrayal that had completely shattered everything I thought I knew about us. One night, about a week after I'd sent Ryan that message, I came home to find Isabel sitting in the living room, phone in hand, looking pale as a ghost. She was shaking, and her eyes darted to me as soon as I walked in. Ethan, she said in a voice so small, I almost didn't recognize it. What did you do? I stopped in my tracks, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I already knew the answer. Ryan must have replied. I didn't do anything, I said coolly, walking past her toward the kitchen. I didn't want her to see how much her words rattled me. I was pretending to be calm, but inside, I could feel the adrenaline rush through me. I didn't want to show it, but I couldn't deny that part of me was enjoying this. Watching her squirm, watching her face crumble. Isabel was on her feet now, her eyes wide, pleading. Ethan, please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you say to him? Why is he acting like this? I turned slowly to face her, and this time I let the smile come. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't a smile of reassurance. It was a smile that was all teeth, cold and calculating. I told him the truth, I said, my voice smooth. That you were using him. That you were playing him just like you played me. He's not the only one who got hurt, Isabel. I wanted to make sure he understood that. She looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to spin this one. Ethan, you don't understand, she stammered. It's not what you think. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I swear I didn't. I raised my hand, cutting her off. Don't try to lie to me anymore. It's too late for that. I know exactly what's going on. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But that feeling faded quickly. She had made her bed. She had pushed me to this point, and now she had to deal with the consequences. I just wanted you to feel what it's like, I said, my voice lower now. For once, I wanted you to know what it's like to be the one who's left in the dark, to be the one who's betrayed. Isabel stood there, speechless, for what felt like an eternity. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room, alone with my thoughts. I wasn't done yet. The game had just begun. The days after Isabel's reaction were almost unbearable. She didn't talk to me much, but when she did, it was always defensive, her words wrapped in excuses and justifications that didn't mean a damn thing to me anymore. I could see her trying, in her own way, to make it right, but it wasn't enough. Nothing she said was ever going to fix the cracks she'd put in our relationship. She spent most of her time at home, fidgeting, clearly uncomfortable in the silence that now stretched between us. The guilt in her eyes was obvious, but so was her defiance. She wasn't ready to give up on the facade just yet. I think she was still trying to figure out what kind of game I was playing, if I was going to let her off easy or if I was really as angry as I seemed. And let me tell you, I wasn't about to back down. I had more in store for her than she could possibly imagine. She asked me about Ryan a few times, but I didn't tell her what I'd done. I didn't tell her how I'd played him, how I'd gotten him to fall for the bait, how I'd set it up so perfectly that she wouldn't even see it coming. All I said was that he'd stopped texting her after the message I sent, and she would have to deal with it on her own. But Isabel didn't back down. She was too proud, too stubborn. She had that sharp edge to her, the one that made me fall in love with her in the first place, and now, it was working against her. Every time she came near me, there was this coldness between us, like the distance had grown so wide it couldn't be bridged by words. She'd try to make small talk, talking about her day at work, or the new project she was working on. But I could see right through it. She was trying to act normal, trying to act like she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built. It was pathetic. One evening, she came home late, and I knew something was off. Her face was flushed, her movements a little too quick, a little too tense. I could tell she'd been drinking, and that only made everything worse. "Hey," she said, standing in the doorway, her voice a little unsteady. "You still up?" I looked up from the couch, where I was pretending to watch TV but really just stewing in my thoughts. "Yeah," I said, not bothering to hide the coldness in my tone. "I'm still up." She stepped inside, hesitating like she wasn't sure what to say or how to act. I'm sorry for how I've been acting. I know I've been distant, and I've been kind of avoiding you," she said, looking down at the floor, like she couldn't meet my eyes. It's been hard, you know? After everything that happened." I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach, but this time, I didn't let her see how much it affected me. I just stared at her, not saying a word. She sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I want to make this right, Ethan," she said quietly. "I know I messed up, and I don't know how to fix it, but I'll do whatever it takes. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." I didn't believe her. Not for a second. Not after everything. If she really loved me, she wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have let it go this far. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes locked on her. "You think you can just apologize and make everything better? You think you can just say the words and I'm supposed to forget what happened?" My voice was low, almost like a growl. You can't fix this. You broke something that's not easily put back together. She flinched, the words hitting her harder than I expected. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. You've been lying to me for months, Isabel. You've been sneaking around, acting like I wouldn't notice. You thought you could have your fun and then come back home like nothing happened. I took a step closer to her, my anger finally breaking free. Well, you were wrong. You can't just walk back in here like nothing happened. She started to speak again, her voice trembling. Ethan, I know I hurt you, but I didn't mean it. It wasn't like you think. Stop. I held my hand up, silencing her. I don't want to hear it. Don't even try to explain. You've had plenty of chances to come clean, and you didn't. And that's what makes this so much worse. Her face crumpled, and I saw the tears start to well up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I couldn't be. I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. I wasn't the one who would let her lie and manipulate me. I turned away from her, heading for the door. I'm going for a walk, I said, my voice flat. Don't wait up. I didn't wait for her response. I just walked out, leaving her there, standing in the middle of the room, looking like she was about to fall apart. I spent the next few hours walking around the city, trying to clear my head. I had a lot of anger still boiling inside me, but more than that, I had a sick satisfaction in knowing that I was getting closer to the endgame. Isabel was losing control. The walls were closing in around her, and she didn't even know how deep I had gone to make sure she felt the weight of what she had done. As I walked, I thought about everything I had done to get to this point. The lies. The manipulation. The way I had slowly woven my web around Ryan without him realizing. I wasn't going to let either of them get away with it. Isabel had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now it was my turn to make her feel what it was like to be the one who was powerless. When I came home later that night, she was still awake, sitting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me like she was waiting for some kind of apology, some sign that I was ready to forgive her. But I wasn't. I'll be going away for a few days, I said casually, as if it was nothing. Her eyes snapped up, a flash of confusion crossing her face. What? Why? I shrugged. Just need some time. To think. Before she could say anything else, I turned and headed for the bedroom to grab my bag. I was done talking. Done with trying to make her understand what she'd done to me. It was time for her to feel what it was like to be the one who was left behind, wondering what would come next. Because the truth was, I wasn't the man she married anymore. And she wasn't the woman I thought I knew. And that, in the end, was what would hurt her the most. I spent the next couple of days in a haze, somewhere between anger and satisfaction, but mostly just the cold certainty that I was done. Done with the lies. Done with trying to fix something that wasn't broken until she decided to take a wrecking ball to it. Every time I thought about Isabel, I felt that familiar rush in my chest, the knot of betrayal that still wouldn't loosen. When I came back home, the house felt different. Not in the way you might expect. There was no big confrontation, no shouting, no dramatic tears. It was quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. Isabel was still here, but there was a distance between us now that no words could bridge. She'd been texting me, calling, leaving messages. But I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't have to. I had the upper hand, and for the first time in weeks, I was at peace with that. One evening, about 3 days after I'd come back, Isabel approached me while I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone. I could tell she was trying to figure out what I was thinking, trying to gauge how close she was to losing me completely. The look on her face was a mix of guilt and desperation, and it made something in me twist. I didn't want to feel sorry for her. I didn't want to give her that power. She took a deep breath and sat down beside me. Ethan, she said softly, I know you're still angry, and I get it. I do. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've been stupid. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Not yet. But I want to try. I want us to fix this. I turned to her slowly, my gaze steady and cold. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, and I knew what she was trying to do. Pull the guilt card, make me feel like I was the one who was being unfair. But it wasn't working. Not anymore. You want to fix this? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. You don't get to fix this, Isabel. You broke it. You don't just get to wave a magic wand and make everything okay again. Her eyes widened, and she reached out to take my hand. I pulled it back, and the look of shock on her face made my stomach churn. But I didn't feel bad. Not anymore. I tried to fix it, she said, her voice cracking. I swear I did. I know I messed up. I love you, Ethan. And I can't stand the thought of losing you. I shook my head. No, you didn't try to fix it. You tried to hide it. You tried to cover it up. And I let you. But I'm done now. I can't do this anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She stared at me for a long time, as if waiting for me to change my mind, but I didn't. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. Not by her, not by anyone. For a second, she didn't speak. Then, finally, her lips parted, and she whispered, "What does that mean? Are you leaving me?" I felt a strange calm settle over me as I stood up, gathering my things. I didn't need to explain myself to her anymore. She knew. She knew what had happened, what she'd done. And she knew I wasn't going to be the same guy I was before. The man she'd fooled, the man who believed in second chances. That man was gone. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice steady. "But we're done. You and me. It's over." I turned and walked toward the door, feeling her eyes on my back. The silence in the room was thick, almost suffocating, but it was the silence of finality. The kind of silence that happens when there's nothing left to say. I didn't look back. I had gotten my revenge. I had made her feel the weight of every lie, every betrayal, every word that came out of her mouth. I'd made her realize that she wasn't in control anymore, that she couldn't just play with people's lives like that. And as I walked out the door, I felt free. I didn't know what was next. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to trust again, or if I could ever love anyone the way I had loved Isabel. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel the ache of betrayal deep in my chest. For the first time, I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else dictate my happiness anymore. And as I drove off into the night, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to be okay. Thank you for watching this video to the end. What did you like most about this story? Write your answers in the comments. See you in the next video.